Next up, we have Children of Men, released in 2006, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, written by Alfonso Cuarón, Timothy J. Sexton, David Arata, Mark Fergus, and Hawk Otsby, based on the book by P.D. James. This film had a budget of $76 million and a global box office of $70 million. In 2027, in a chaotic world in which women have become somehow infertile, a former activist agrees to help transport a miraculously pregnant woman to a sanctuary at sea. This film stars Clive Owen, Julianne Moore, Michael Caine, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Claire Hope Ashitty, and Charlie Hunnam.
This is one of my favorite movies, hands down. And we've talked about Cuarón a couple of times with Azkaban and with Gravity. He also made Roma, Y Tu Mama Tambien. I could compare him to a Stanley Kubrick type figure in filmmaking because he doesn't make that many movies, but every movie he makes is extremely impactful and powerful. Obviously, they have very different styles and aesthetics, but I think what Alfonso Cuarón does with his filmmaking is he always transports you into the movies, unlike any other filmmaker before. He helped bring the sense of realism to American cinema. Because his Mexican films he made before he made American films, they also used a lot of handheld work and a lot of long takes. And obviously, he inspired filmmaking in the early and mid-2000s for Americans to bring the realism to their cinema. And it's different from the realism of French cinema, where they began using very long takes, but they weren't using handheld too often. And Cuarón really brought handheld filmmaking to the scene of America. But a lot of people think that adding realism handheld is the only thing that makes things feel realistic in film, but it's the combination of handheld camera work along with very long takes that really transport you into a scene and make it feel like real life, because his theory is that life doesn't have cuts and life doesn't have edits. And so the longer you can hold on a scene, the more it transports the audience into the moment with the characters inside of the film.
Yeah, the handheld, of course, shoulder-mounted handheld, which isn't super common in a ton of films. Obviously, you'll see handheld, but it's usually some sort of Steadicam or some.
They'll even make it handheld on purpose.
Some sort of rig to make it a little smoother, but there's a lot of shaky handheld in this film, which he actually gets a shot of this in Prisoner of Azkaban when Harry opens the door. It's the only shot that's handheld in that movie, and shaky handheld, because obviously it's paying homage to his style. But Cuarón really pioneered this style that's reached modern Hollywood of realism and handheld. And this film was one of those movies in my youth that really changed my perception on film and really helped me develop a true passion and love of movies. And it's a true modern masterpiece. One of my favorite movies made this century, one of my favorite movies ever. And I think Alfonso, this is the best film, I think, in his career still, even with how good Roma is and everything. And it's possibly also the most underrated and most underappreciated film ever made. I mean, it was a commercial flop. It grossed $70 million on a budget of $76 million. At Oscar time, it was mostly overlooked. It only earned 3 nominations, none for acting, directing, or Best Picture, which is blowing my mind just thinking about that. And the studio never really figured out how to sell it. I think they didn't understand really what it was or how good it actually was. And, you know, the biggest pull to the movie, you know, Clive Owen wasn't a massive movie star at the time. He was in Closer.
He was just big in Europe.
Yeah. Julianne Moore is the big draw. She's the star in the movie, and she, spoiler, gets killed within 28 minutes of the movie. And it debuted at Venice Film Festival and got a standing ovation, obviously, because of how good it is. But still, they chose other films to prop up as their bait for Oscar picks. I think they did United 93 was their big option to go for to try to get Best Picture nominations. And this left Cuarón very frustrated because he put so much into this movie. He put his entire basically career on the line with this movie, and it obviously didn't make a lot of money. And I think I read that he had very intense and difficult years of his life after making this, because it really put him down a dark rabbit hole, because he probably was limited in what he could do after this.
I don't think people understood what this movie had in it. It was very much ahead of its time, and the reason why it's become such a revered classic is because I think it takes repeated viewings of this movie to really fully digest what Cuarón put into it, because there's so much substance into the story. It's not just a on the surface it's a simple story, but there's so much depth to it in terms of religious symbolism, artistic symbolism, humanity, the themes of the world, of the crises of the world that we're facing today, like immigration and refugee crises in the Middle East, and the lack of resources and
The COVID pandemic.
the COVID pandemic. This film came out in 2006, and the film is set in 2027. And in this film, they detail that in 2020, in this world, a viral pandemic spread across the entire globe and changed the earth. And this movie came out in 2006, so they literally predicted something like that would happen. And great philosophers have stated that civilization can end very quickly and very easily if a few certain things happen in terms of global catastrophes. And this film is the result of a few global catastrophes in terms of the lack of fertility among humans, as well as the spread of pandemics, viral pandemics, and the spread of anarchy throughout various countries across the earth. And so all of these catastrophes and crises culminated in the world that these characters live in now.
And also constant warring countries too. Mass war is one of the main points, one of the main turning points of this world, and what led to the destruction of basically modern society, where now Britain is really the only country, despite how unhinged it is, that has some sort of stability. This episode is also brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your comfort, obsesses over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Again, it's the holiday season. You got to get your gift shopping done. Do it early so you don't have to stress about it in mid-December. Manscaped.com is the perfect place to get gifts for all the men in your life. You got a boyfriend, a husband, brother, siblings, cousins, uncles, aunts, your father. I'm telling you, any guy would love any product from Manscaped. We got their performance packages. They send us their briefs, t-shirts. Their cologne smells fantastic. Like, I don't wear cologne, but I kind of dig this cologne a lot. Their lawnmower is the best buzzer I've ever used in my life. It's got a light on it. It's waterproof. The Weed Whacker is a great way to, subtly tell the men in your life that they need to trim up specific spots like their nose hairs and ear hairs. So it's, you got to groom. We got to groom. It's part of life. We're human beings. We got hair growing everywhere. So manscaped.com. Use Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Again, Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping.
It shows you news headlines throughout the entire film. You see various, it'll be in newspapers, it'll be on television. And some of the media news headlines you see in this film are Africa devastated by nuclear fallout, U.S. troops at full attack, militias occupy Cincinnati, Russia in crisis, bombing of Saudi pipeline disrupts world oil supply, war and famine lead to mass migration, all foreigners now illegal. And so these are headlines that they seem like they are absolute possibilities, especially after dealing with the last year within 2020 of things that could happen in the future. And all it takes is a combination of catastrophes and conflicts to spin the world into chaos.
And I think Cuarón opens this film up brilliantly, where he so effectively shows you this world that you're living in and the toll it's taken on citizens. And he opens it up in that cafe with all these people, these citizens just in line, but they're just entranced by what's happening on the news, where they're talking about how the youngest person alive, who was the most famous person on earth, was killed, stabbed to death because he wouldn't sign an autograph, and he died at 18 years old, which means the youngest person who was alive is dead. And he contrasts this with these people watching this program, and they all have this look of despair and this loss of hope, which is the main theme of the film. Hope is the main theme of Children of Men. And he shows you the loss of hope in these people's faces. And then also he shows the lead character, Theo, doesn't even care what's on the news. He just walks through all these people, orders a coffee, leaves this cafe, walks 10 steps, and then there's an explosion right behind him. So he's just showing you this messed up world and how dark it is, and how the will to live has basically not fully left human beings, but it's pretty close to leaving everybody's spirit.
Exactly. And this opening scene is also a brilliant one take. And Cuarón does two things to show Theo as a character who's different from everyone else in the cafe. And the first one you already mentioned is that he has no reaction to Baby Diego's death. And for the general public, Baby Diego's death is the death of hope. He was the last line of hope that humanity had because he was the last baby that was born. And Theo as a character, he already has no hope. He's complete. He lost his hope before humanity lost their hope because he had a child who died years previously. So that put him on this downward spiral of nihilism and thinking that life has no meaning. And so he's already gone in hope, in terms of hope. And so that's why he has no reaction to Baby Diego. And also, Cuarón being a great director and blocker, in order to make Theo stand out for the audience when we're watching this film, all of the background actors in this cafe, they're actually cast purposely because they're very short. And so when Clive Owen stands beside all these characters, he's much taller than him. So the audience their eyes gravitate towards him. So we already know immediately this person's important and this person is different from everyone else in the scene. And so that's a subtle hint of blocking in production design to show us the audience that Clive Owen is an important character.
And these handheld shots and these long takes are incredibly effective at bringing realism to the film, like we've talked about. And that's the main benefit of it. But also there is a con to it where it requires an incredible amount of blocking, like you just explained, and time. So it takes a toll on a film crew. It takes a toll on a director and the producers, spending so much time, spending so many hours just to get these one shots. And the movie uses several lengthy shot sequences. The longest of these is a 3-minute and 19-second scene, one take of Key giving birth. The 4-minute and 7-second ambush on the country road of the car driving. And the end of the film has that incredible 6-minute, 18-second long take of Theo gets captured by the fishes, escapes, and runs down a street through a building of a raging battle. So these are incredibly complex scenes, and Cuarón and Emmanuel Lubezki, the cinematographer, are expertly craft these sequences into highly detailed scenes where, yeah, it's just one camera, one take, but they're getting so many different kinds of shots. They're getting close-ups, they're getting reactions, they're getting wide shots. So all these, not even just them, but the characters and the actors have to be on their A game, and they really have to plan this out because they all have to react perfectly because it's a giant play, really, one take.
Yeah, it's just like theater where the actors and the crew, they rehearse over and over and over again, and then they have like 2 days to film. And the reason why it's so effective is because of the way they shoot it with this guerrilla-style documentary-ish context and visual aesthetic. It makes it feel like these long takes are improvised and they're not planned, and it makes it seem like we're just following Theo and the others and we're reacting rather than the camera work already knowing what they're doing, the crew and the actors. So it makes it feel like everything is fresh and like it's really happening before our eyes rather than it being like perfectly choreographed. Even though it is choreographed, the way they film it makes it seem very spontaneous.
And that's how we experience the world. We don't experience the world in cuts. Yeah, we blink our eyes and look in different directions, but we're really experiencing these internal log takes, and that's what we're watching. And that's why it feels so much like real life, watching these entirely long, extremely long takes that really show you the world and show this world that Cuarón's created.
I think one of the most powerful parts of the film is that if you think about it, this movie takes all of the problems and tragedies and crises and conflicts of third world nations in terms of like extreme poverty, refugee crises, immigration crises, dominating government, and it brings all these third world problems into a first world nation like England. And so it allows people who, like us, who grew up and live in first world countries to finally see firsthand what it would be like if our societies fell under the same problems that third world countries suffer under. And it's really fascinating.
In much of the filmmaking, yes, we're following these characters, and Cuarón does these following shots to make it seem like you're just following Theo around, you're following these characters around, and he wanted to make it seem like you just took your own camera, and it's documentary style at times, but also he likes to take the attention away from the storyline and away from the characters and show you what's happening in the world, what's happening in the background. You know, he gets so many shots of just the buildings and rubble and the background actors and billboards.
People in cages.
What they're saying, yeah, the refugee detainee cages, even the buses with barred windows and the graffiti and everything. All this builds this horrifying, bleak world of just, again, the loss of hope and the destruction of human civilization.
It makes the world more believable because it feels like we're documenting the world, not just the characters, not just the actors, but when he moves the camera away from when a director moves the camera away from the actors, it's for a reason, and the purpose for this is to make it feel like we're inhabiting this world and we're observing not just the story but the world they're set in. This film does a great job of showing the different ways in which people can react to catastrophes and conflicts like this. And each main character in this film has a different reaction to the infertility crisis. And Theo himself, we already talked about, he's nihilistic and he's completely hopeless. And he was hopeless before the crisis happened. And that's why he thinks that there's no future for mankind, and he thinks that the mission that Julian asks him to carry out is pointless, and he has no interest in helping the human project and helping Key out at first. And then Julian, his ex-wife, her reaction has been she's spent the last couple of decades continuing her fight against the government by becoming a leader within the terrorist organization. And Jasper, played by Michael Caine, his reaction to this world he's shutting himself off by using drugs to numb himself from emotion, and he's always high and he's always distracting himself from the problems of the world. Nigel, who played by Danny Huston, who is Theo's cousin in the film, and he's a wealthy bureaucrat who spends his time saving and restoring and protecting the world's most famous pieces of art. And his viewpoint is he doesn't even think about the conflicts and the crises. He doesn't even think about the future of humanity. He's living in the past. That's why he's preserving this art, because he lives in history and all he cares about is what happened before, and he's distracting himself from the realities of the future can bring.
And the irony of his character is the human race is about to be extinct. It's going to be extinct in one lifetime, and he's spending all of his time it makes him very wealthy. He clearly lives very well off compared to most people in the world. He spends all his time restoring things that will never be appreciated again, despite how beautiful the art is. This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by our good friends at movieposters.com. Use coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today. It's the holiday season. It's time to get all your gifts, all your presents. I'm sure you have some movie-loving friends and family members out there. Getting them a gift from movieposters.com is the best thing you can get them using the coupon code Raiders15 to get 15% off your order right now at checkout. They offer great designs like plaque designs, original designs, framing, backlight, canvas.
Danny Huston's character, Nigel, is an example of how Cuarón uses a great amount of art symbolism in this film to portray ideas. For example, in Nigel's dining room, he has Pablo Picasso's painting Guernica, which Picasso made in response to General Franco's bombing of Guernica, Spain, which killed 1,600 civilians. And there's also a giant floating blimp in the shape of a pig outside of Nigel's building, and this is a reference to Pink Floyd's album cover for Animals, which was based upon the Orwellian novel about Stalin's rule over Russia as a communist dictator. And there's also a lot of famous Banksys you've seen throughout the film, and Banksy is obviously an artist who uses his art to depict social activism and display themes of social justice. And when Key reveals her pregnant belly to Theo, her pose is identical to this famous painting of the birth of Venus, which is about the fertility of mankind. Cuarón uses art throughout the film to translate the ideas he's showing with the story in a brilliant way.
And this film has an incredible plot of Theo smuggling the first pregnant woman in 20 years away from the government and away from these underground organizations into the Human Project to help cure the infertility crisis. So it's a sensational world that Cuarón's built, and it's an incredible plot that the author and these writers came up with.
And there's also a lot of religious symbolism in this film in terms of Theo you can say is comparable to Joseph because he's not the father of the baby, but he acts as a father figure and a protector of the baby. And Key is comparable to Mary. And the baby, Dylan, is essentially Jesus.
And Key is the key to the future. Her name is just perfectly given. Mm-hmm. In the movie's advertising tells you why. She's aptly named. What happens is Theo is convinced to help Julianne Moore's character, Julian, and her organization smuggle Key out of the country to somewhere else to that project.
This is one of my favorite Chiwetel Ejiofor performances. This is one of his major first roles as an actor, and I think he plays a great villain in this film, and it showed his talent as an actor.
Yeah, and so he's part of this organization that Julian is the leader of, and we have this infamous car one take where it's Julian, Theo, Key, and Miriam, the midwife, who's helping. And Luke, who's in the midwife. Miriam is taking care of Key in her pregnancy. And Cuarón wanted to make this amazing scene with one take inside the car with a camera, but the problem is you can't put a film crew in this van with character actors as well. There's no space at all for a camera. So Emmanuel Lubezki, he came up with this incredible rig to help fulfill Cuarón's vision, where they basically cut the roof off of this van, and they had this incredibly remote-operated camera system that moved around fluidly inside the car with the characters.
Yeah,
it
was above them.
Yeah, and the director and Cuarón and Lubezki actually sat above the car in this little chamber, and they controlled the camera movements and what was going on, and it allowed them to capture Cuarón's vision, where he wanted this long take with so much going on. I mean, they're driving down this road, and there's people chasing after them and slamming on the windows. There's 4 characters in the car, and he's getting close-up shots of each one of them and what's happening next. And this camera rig, it just moves around fluidly throughout the car, getting wide shots, close-ups, where we get to see what's happening outside the windows. And he said he would have had to have succumbed to using green screen and CGI, but you really can't get the real effect that you can see of people running up to the car and the woods and the trees and the sky. And it's just an incredible scene.
And along with the camera that moved fluidly above the actors, the seats that the actors were sitting in, they also moved out of the way of the camera as the camera moved towards them to get a shot of another actor. That actor's chair would move back to give space for the camera, and then it would move back, into the car when they were on frame. So the entire car itself was this rig that manipulated every part of the car in order to get the shot. And this shot was made with not just exactly one single take, but I think it was 6 different shots that were blended together digitally.
And this leads to this incredibly moving scene where Julian gets shot through the windshield, and it's absolutely heartbreaking as an audience member, because you learn that she had a relationship with Theo, and they had lost a child, and they had a connection still, and that ping pong ball trick, which was super fun and cute to see them do, and just leads to her death right there, which means that they don't really know what's going to happen now with the organization, because she was the leader, she was in charge. And it unfortunately leads to the scenes where we learn that Luke led this entire coup, basically, of Julian, and assassinated her to get control of Key in her pregnancy, to use it for his revolution and use it as he wants to use the baby as like a power play, because Julian wants to bring the baby to the human project, but Luke wants to take it and keep it within the organization as a way to gain power from the government. And right before Julian actually gets shot, there's in the car, Miriam is actually peeling an orange, and Cuarón pays homage to The Godfather in this film. And whenever someone's eating an orange or there's an orange on camera, it means impending doom or death for a character in the film. And it's pretty emotional when you see it. And if you watch it again and you haven't noticed that, you can pick up on it happening multiple times in the film.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable scene, and the first time you see it, it's absolutely breathtaking. And this leads to Julian taking them the only place he knows that's safe, and that's Jasper's house. Jasper is one of my favorite Michael Caine performances ever. You've never seen him play a character like this, a weed-smoking hippie, political activist, and he adds a lot of comedy and personality to the film, and he's instantly lovable, and I think he steals the show every scene he's in.
He actually based his performance on John Lennon, who he says he was friends with, and he did a terrific job. He even looks like him. He's got the long hair, the beard. He's even got those round glasses. He sounds like him. He did like that very John Lennon nasally voice and his mannerisms. And Jasper, even though, like you said, he secluded himself away from everything, he's kind of like a ray of positivity and a ray of hope that we hadn't seen for quite some time in the film. So he brings a lot of color to the movie.
And like we said earlier, Jasper is a person, and his reaction to the world is he just numbs himself with drugs, and he's always smoking weed, and just he's constantly high, it seems. And also, him and his wife, this storyline shows the ways in which the world itself is reacting to this, to the conflicts and this illusion of humanity. And for example, the Quietus drug, which is a company that provides a drug which allows you to kill yourself peacefully. And it's actually just like a prescribed drug, and there are commercials for it on television. And it's this incredibly dark concept that a government-approved drug to kill yourself is a commonplace thing in this world. And also, they have a cat as a pet, and one of the themes in this film, it's hidden in the background. Again, Cuarón put so much in this movie without actually putting it in your face. It's all there, but you have to really look for it. Is animals are used by humans in this world as surrogates for children, and pets are more common than ever before in humanity. And there are even commercials on the televisions depicting ads for clothing lines for pets and all sorts of products for pets, because pets have become so important to people as surrogates for children.
And just to keep going on that, there's the deer in the elementary school, which I think the elementary school has one of the most beautiful shots in the film. And obviously we see that deer, which represents the children inside elementary school who aren't there. And it's a shot where Theo and Miriam are in a classroom. They're just surrounded by darkness and rubble of this classroom, and they're looking out the windows at Key, who's out on, I think she's on a swing, sitting down on a swing, and she's just basked in this glowing light of this window. And Cuarón geniusly has a piece of the window broken out, and this hole in the window is what frames Key outside, and she's just basking in this like heavenly glow and this heavenly light. And also right next to Key in the window is a construction paper drawing of a child attached to the wall. And then we look to the right of the frame, and it's Theo and Miriam again standing in darkness and rubble, and they're living in this desperate world, and the end of that civilization is there, and they're living in the past and they're stuck there, whereas Key is living in this light, and she's the future of humanity, and she's full of hope, and she's full of potential, and she's basically sort of this godlike figure or this bringer of life to the world.
And Key, in her representation of hope, is what helps pretty much save and transform Theo as a character, where when he sees Key's pregnant belly, he understands the importance of the situation, and he's inspired to put his life on the line to help get Key across the border, and she instills new hope in him, and his character completely changes from this hopeless, nihilistic man in the opening of the film to a person who's willing to die for something greater than himself.
And it's quite the twist when we learn that Luke, at this little community that they have in these little ranches, that Luke's hired a hit on Julian again. And even there's so much realism in this film and so much tension that Cuarón builds. And I think one of my favorite parts of this movie is when they escape from Luke and the others.
Yeah,
and they're in the car at the farmhouse and they can't get the car started, and they're rolling it down the hill. And just Charlie Hunnam is just huffing and puffing, sprinting down the hill, and he's really sprinting. He's running real fast. That guy looks like a good athlete. And it's just so much tension when they get to the bottom of the hill and trying to start the car. And Cuarón basically creates the entire film, this immense tension, all leading to one singular moment at the end of the film.
It's an amazing sequence where the shot starts with Theo looking out the door of the farmhouse, and it leads to with him avoiding the henchmen watching guard, and then powering the car and pushing it down the hill. And it's an amazing sequence, but it's still nothing compared to the final action sequence, where it's pretty much them running through the war-torn war zone and moving through the actual gunfight battle between the soldiers and Luke's terrorist organization. And it's one of the most astounding sequences ever put on film. And I remember my jaw dropped the first time I saw it. It was so incredible. And this is not like the car sequence where Cuarón blended together different shots digitally. This really is one take that they shot without any digital editing at all.
And there's another great one take before that where Key gives birth, and this little Romanian woman helps them get into this little room, and they have I think they have just a mattress and a couple of blankets, and Theo has to help Key give birth to the first human being ever born in 20 years, and it's incredibly emotional and moving scene, and that leads to them moving on to try to get to the Human Project. And back to that incredible ending action sequence long take where they're inside the building and they're in the middle of this raging war between the soldiers and the revolters, and it's Key is carrying a child, an infant, and a baby in these buildings with soldiers everywhere, gunfire everywhere, explosions, and it's the babies crying and screaming that stops the firefight. It stops the soldiers, and they're all just blown away, and they can't even, they're speechless as they allow Key and Theo to walk out of that building before it gets destroyed and walk past them. And then the crazy thing is, after they walk past them, the firefight begins again.
It's a really incredible moment, and they're all awestruck because no one's seen a baby in 18 years, and no one's heard the cries of a baby in so long, and it's just a powerful moment to show what this baby means to humanity, where it stopped a war, it stopped a firefight just from existing, and it's one of the best moments of the film. And this is where Theo and Key, they very much are symbolisms for Mary and Joseph, and they're protecting Jesus, and as Joseph, he's a protector for these two.
And the Holy Family, and they make it to that boat before that. I think they call it an airstrike that's about to hit. Mm-hmm. So you have to get out of there, and they make it to the boat, and it's an incredibly beautiful scene where, as Theo's dying because he got a mortally fatal wound during the firefight protecting Key, he's showing her how to burp the baby. He's like, put her on your shoulder, and he teaches her how to burp a baby because she doesn't know how to burp a baby. She's never seen a baby before. And Theo dies protecting Key and the baby and getting them to the boat to be rescued by the Human Project.
And it's almost as if, because after this, she's alone on the boat, but then she can see the light of the Human Project's boat in the distance, so she's going to be saved by the Human Project. And it's almost as if the real story hasn't begun yet. This just sets the stage for the future of humanity. You know what I mean?
I think Quaron shows that by ending the film with the laughter and voices of children in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an unbelievable film, and I think that this really is one of the masterpieces of the last 20 years. Easily one of the best movies of the 21st century for sure. And I just think that people weren't ready for a film that was so deep and
plausible and real.
Yeah, and it had so much to say. And I think that people didn't understand it, and they weren't able to digest how much Quaron put into this movie and how much meaning it has. But now I think as time has worn on, people understand that this is a real significant piece of film.